I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and in 2024, this is probably going to be one of my most fun days at work because I'm driving a brand new Japanese K car on Australian roads. This is the Mitsubishi EK Cross, and Mitsubishi Australia is broadly considering whether this is the sort of vehicle that they might like to sell as a brand new car on our market in future. Now, there's not too many K cars under consideration in Australia. It's not really a segment that has sold well in this country or really been explored in the past. But there's a few different undercurrents that generate some lines of thought about whether this could be a fruitful segment in this country. Firstly, I think we've all noticed that new cars are getting much more expensive. It's about time we had a conversation about whether purchasing a new car outright can get cheaper. Now, there are still cars like the MG3, there are still cars like the Kia Picanto, which are very small. But what if we went smaller and fully electric? That's where this EV EK Cross, which has about 180 Ks of real-world urban range, as tested by me today, comes into the fore. The second undercurrent is Australia's new emissions standard, which is coming into force next year if the legislation passes Parliament. And car brands are really going to need to have more hybrids and more EVs in order to avoid significant penalties for generating too much CO2 across the new vehicles that they sell. For a brand like Mitsubishi, which does a roaring trade in diesel Triton utes, vehicles like the Outlander plug-in hybrid SUV, and the EK Cross EV can help contribute to drive down that average CO2 figure. Of course, it is tiny. That definitely generates some questions around safety. We're going to get into all that in today's video. We'll start inside, then we'll take it for a drive. Before we get started, hit subscribe below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. If you know about the Japanese K car thing, you'll know that these are tiny vehicles with regulated maximum sizes in their home market of Japan. And here on bigger Australian roads among bigger vehicles, it definitely looks small from the outside, where it's a little bit smaller than something like a Kia Picanto. Jump inside though, and it's clear that Mitsubishi and its partner Nissan, which has co-developed this vehicle, have been doing K cars for a long time, because it's quite amazing the tricks that they can pull with the interior to make you feel like you're driving a bigger car. And as we'll find out when we do take it for a drive on the road, you psychologically don't feel like you're in such a small, narrow vehicle. And I'm not just saying that, I'm actually giving you my honest opinion on this car. The other thing that Mitsubishi have done is that you sit pretty high, which makes this thing feel like a small SUV. Its name is EK Cross, so I suppose that's the point. Sitting high also abates that sense that you're in a really tiny vehicle. Anyway, psychologically, it kind of works for me, as does the general layout of the interior. It feels modern, it feels up to the minute. We've got a decent sized touchscreen up here with Apple CarPlay built in. We've got hard keys, you've got a climate panel down here with touch capacitive buttons, and a digital instrument cluster, so it actually doesn't feel too down market. But what about price? Well, this vehicle sells for about 25,000 AUD in its home market in Japan. Mitsubishi Australia sort of gently floats the idea that maybe it could come to Australia at $30,000. Personally, I think that's too expensive. Now that MG is selling its MG4 Excite for $39,990 drive away, BYD is also around that sort of space with the Dolphin. This car cannot be that expensive. Personally, I reckon $25,000 drive away is the target price Mitsubishi needs to aim at for this vehicle. I don't think it can start with a 3. It's too small, the range is too short. 180 kilometers is the official rating. I managed to get very, very close to that. All will be revealed later in the video. Back to the interior. We are sitting on nice, light, bright cloth seats, which have a good amount of support. Also got this flip down armrest, leather bound steering wheel, hard keys for your safety systems, even adaptive cruise control and lane assist on this tiny car. And while some of the materials are a little bit cheap, it is meant to be an affordable entry-level car. Love the practical solutions like this shelf here, another one down here. Your visibility out is excellent. You're driving a box after all. I think you'd find this car more livable than you'd expect. Also, there is an option to bring in a lower end car without one of the digital displays, without some of the cool styling outside, which could be even cheaper. Well, if there's a big shock about the EK Cross, it is this voluminous back seat. I'm 6 foot, 183 centimeters. Headroom is, as expected, good. It's quite a tall car. Legroom behind my own driving position is outrageous. This car is shorter than a Kia Picanto, but its front overhang is really, really short. That's how Mitsubishi makes it happen. Tow room is also good. It is only a 4-seater, so we don't even have to talk about middle seat space. And it's even quite a comfortable back seat because the battery is tiny. This is a full EV that uses the Outlander PHEV's battery pack, 20 kilowatt hours in total size. About 18 of that is usable. So the battery is pretty skinny, pretty small, doesn't really eat up your packaging here in the car. Big compromise though to boot space because we have to pay for this legroom somehow. Now the size of the EK Cross is a little bit difficult to tell from photographs. It's certainly an unusual looking vehicle, at least here on Australian roads. If you've ever been to Japan, these sorts of K cars are commonplace everywhere you go, from the city to the country in that nation. But it is certainly an unusual looking vehicle. The size is a little bit smaller than a Kia Picanto, so it's not crazy. The main thing you're going to notice is that it is very narrow, but the wheels, which are pretty skinny, have been pushed right out to the corners. That has prioritized passenger space, as we just saw. If you open the boot, it is tiny, just over 100 liters of cargo capacity. It's going to be a couple of school bags. It's going to be a small grocery shop. Underneath the boot floor, you're going to find a little bit of space for this car's CHAdeMO charging cable. So obviously not the most practical vehicle on the market. That's not the point. This is really an errand vehicle. So this is a really exciting moment for me. I've gotten to do some pretty cool things over the last year. Actually, drove my first Kombi. This kind of feels in the same sort of sphere. This is my first K car experience, and I always thought that would be in Japan, but it's right here on Australian roads, on our testing roads, which is ideal because when a brand is kind of thinking about bringing a vehicle like this to Australia, it's all very academic until you actually rip the band-aid off, you bring one in and you test them on Aussie roads. And that's exactly what Mitsubishi Australia has done, and I congratulate them for doing so. Ultimately, my philosophy on a car like this is it could work here at the right price. The EK Cross is a very small car, but there are other very small cars already on sale in Australia. The dimensions and the aesthetics of this vehicle look unusual, but I'll put on screen now the dimensions of the EK Cross compared to the dimensions of the Kia Picanto, which is a car that we rate highly at Chasing Cars. We have run one as a long-termer. We like it as an entry-level vehicle, and the EK Cross isn't actually that much smaller than a Picanto. It just has that really tiny front overhang, which is going to be a cause of anxiety. When you look at this vehicle, it just doesn't look as large or as sturdy as some of the other cars that you see on the road. And Mitsubishi are the first to admit this probably would not be a 5-star car. And there's an open question about how necessary that 5-star safety rating is. And frankly, I want to hear from you guys, so please let me know down below in the comments of this video. It does make fleet sales of the EK Cross seem quite difficult, but as an urban runabout, as a second EV to have in the family, perhaps as just a really small car if the price was right. If it was rated 3 stars, I think I'm very curious to see whether that would have an impact, if it had an impact. But let's talk about the mechanicals of the EK Cross, because it's actually quite a fascinating little car. Power is extremely modest on paper, 48 kilowatts or thereabouts. Torque, just under 200 Newton meters. But the magic trick up the sleeve of the EK Cross is that it is light. That's not a word that we associate with full EVs typically in Chasing Cars tests, but this one is sub 1,100 kilos before you put us into the car. That is a proper lightweight special. The reason it's able to achieve that lightness is by having a modestly sized battery. We actually have the same basic pack as the Outlander PHEV here with a slight reconfiguration in order to fit the profile of the EK Cross. It's 20 kilowatt hours in total size, about 18 kilowatt hours usable. And the fascinating thing is that claim of 180 k's of range was basically completely borne out on our real world test of the car, where I wasn't actually driving necessarily economically, I was just driving normally. And when I think about the sort of driving that I do every day, I live in Sydney, I commute to and from the Chasing Cars office. My commute is 12 or 13 kilometers each way. Occasionally I run other errands or have other places to go, but the vast majority of my days throughout the year, I don't drive 180 kilometers. The other beauty of a battery, which is only about 18 kilowatt hours in usable size, is just a 3-pin wall socket would completely recharge the battery overnight, which is really handy. So this car is light, it's extremely efficient, and because of that lightweight nature, despite having less than 50 kilowatts of power, it actually is quite nippy off the line. All of that electric torque arrives straight away. We never noticed any deficiency of power driving around the Sydney suburbs or even on these country roads that we've been using slightly outside the city. Not only does the EK Cross keep up with traffic, it's actually quite commanding in traffic because it zips off the line faster than other cars. It deploys its torque really nicely. And beyond that, just like in the Outlander, the motor is tuned nicely. It's actually quite a silky experience compared to like a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder petrol buzz box. The EK Cross feels pretty refined. Now, when it comes to braking, we have a little button down here for a 1-pedal mode, which I've been using the whole time, and it works pretty well. Not quite as aggressive as like a Tesla 1-pedal drive. That's simply because we don't have the capacity to regen at as high an input rate in a car like this, but for everyday driving, it feels well tuned. The other big surprise for me was the ride. Now, we are on really small alloy wheels in this car, so we have a little bit of sidewall, but it's surprising how smoothly and comfortably this vehicle rides. You don't feel like you're bouncing around, there's virtually no head toss. Really impressed with the ride quality of the EK Cross. The handling, as long as you're a little bit patient with these skinny tires, it's totally fine. You just have to respect that this is not trying to be a sports car. It's not trying to bowl around corners really fast. It is just an everyday vehicle that drives perfectly well. Visibility out is also excellent. We do have lane keep assist, which has gone off once or twice when it's detected the edge of the lane marking. There is a little bit of recalibration of safety systems that would need to happen for the Australian market. But by and large, this vehicle doesn't really need wholesale reconfiguration in order to be sold in Australia. If the decision was made that it had to be 5 stars for safety, that would require massive re-engineering. It may even require this car simply not come to Australia. But if its safety credentials are enough, there's not much that would have to be done to this car in order to sell it on our market. And personally, I hope it does come because it's cheerful, it espouses kind of what we need urban EVs to espouse. Modest battery, high efficiency, lightweight, just enough power, just enough to sort of get along in the cut and thrust of urban traffic, and it does all of that and more. I kind of went into this experience expecting to say that this car was not going to be the right fit for our market. I'm pretty cynical, and if you're a subscriber, you already know that. But I'm pleasantly surprised, and I do think at a sharp price as an entry-level vehicle, this car really does need close consideration. But I understand that I live in motoring journalist world, which is why I want to turn it over to you. Tell me what you think of the idea of an electric K car like this actually being sold for real by the manufacturer in Australia. Let me know in the comments. So those are my first impressions driving the Mitsubishi EK Cross right here on Australian roads. I've deliberately used the roads that we use to test every car for chasing cars in the city and in the country to see how this little Mitsubishi actually drives in demanding Australian conditions. And you know what? It actually drives just fine for our market. From inside, you'd think you were driving something like a Volkswagen T-Cross. It feels bigger, it feels more stable, it feels more powerful, it feels more refined than its diminutive size would actually suggest. But as I alluded to at the start of this video, everything has to be priced correctly to work here in Australia. And when you've got MG selling the base MG4 for $39,990 drive away, a car that we've rated very highly, you really need to think carefully about what something like an EK Cross would need to cost. For me, my target price for this vehicle would probably be something like $24,990 drive away, which is very sharp. That's probably under where Mitsubishi is thinking about pricing the car right now. But with new emission standards hitting the Australian market, with the incentive system up for changes in future, you might think that that 25 grand price could become achievable. That's where I think this car needs to sit. Very keen to know your opinion though, so please let me know down below this video in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.